Hey, and welcome back to another Learning Java 2D Game Programming video. So in our last video, we made sure that we can save and load our scenery objects. So currently we only have this tree, but as you can see, it's loaded up just fine in the menu state, and it's loading up just fine in the game state as well. But the problem is now, we cannot change these sceneries once we've placed them. So if you placed a tree, there is absolutely no way of deleting it, or, well, that was actually not true. You can both delete it and move it if you want to, but then you'd have to find the right line in the save file and do it there, and that's terrible. So in this video, we are going to be making some editor mouse actions so that we can move these trees and delete them. But first, we want to be able to see which tree is selected. So we're going to make use of the selection circle, and I've decided that we're going to change a little bit how that works. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to head over to the GameObject class. I've decided that here, we're going to have a list of GameObjects that I'm going to call attachments. So these will be more like, I guess, visual attachments, but they are game objects, so we can have some fun logic in the future. And I guess that's kind of like having a child to a parent, but for the parenting, I'm expecting the game objects to be inside of the state, but these attachments, I'm not going to add them to the list of game objects inside of the state. They're only going to live within this game object. And you'll see what I mean. So first of all, let's just initialize this list. There we go. And let's just make some of these methods that we're gonna need to use, like attach. So attach a game object, and that entails the game objects taking the position of this position, and then let's attachments add the game object. And in the same way, I'm gonna have a detach. So when you detach an object, we don't need to do anything with the position because it's gonna be gone. We're gonna do remove a game object. Let's make a getter, so I'll insert a getter for the whole list attachments. And I'm gonna also make this helper method clear attachments. So attachments.clear. All right, awesome. So now the selection circle will be an attachment instead. So that means we're gonna need to do some refactoring for the selection circle. This means that we are not looking at the parent anymore, so we can just return the sprite. And let's see, while we're in here, this selection circle's size is fitted to our humanoids currently. And when we select maybe a tree, we are gonna want it to be larger. So I'm gonna make I'm just gonna copy this entire constructor. In here, I'm gonna give it a double scale. And here, let's just multiply by the scale when we set the size. And it is expecting an int. So let's just cast these two ints. There we go. Now we can call this from the other constructor with 1 as scale, and it will work like before. All right, great. I think we're done in here. And this, of course, means we need to change some stuff about the player and the handling of the target. So I feel like it can still have a reference to its selection circle, but now we don't need to take it in. The reason why we did that before was that we had to add it to the states list of game objects. So we had to initialize it outside of our player, and now we don't have to, so that's good. I'm just gonna make a new selection circle. There. And that means we need to change some stuff here. So wherever we are parenting or clearing parent, first of all, we don't need to parent anymore, but we need to make sure that we attach our selection circle to the right target and then detach it from the old one. So here where we parent, that would have included both of them, of course, since the selection circle can only have one parent, but a game object can be in several lists, so it could have been attached to several different other game objects. We don't want that, so we need to make sure. And the target can be null, so we need to check that. So if target isn't null, then I'm going to say target.detach selection circle, and then let's just say npc.attach selection circle. And here again, we need to check if the target isn't null. Then we want to probably set it to null, and we also want to detach this selection circle. So I'm just gonna, actually we're not done. We need to head over to the game state. Here we are passing a circle in. We don't need this circle. Bye. All right, so that's a little better, and hopefully it's gonna work the same now. It isn't, because we're still not done. I'm getting ahead of myself. We're not rendering the attachments, so we need to do that. So I'm gonna go here to the renderer, render game objects, and I'm going to break out this little part that actually renders the sprites. I'm going to say refactor, extract method, and then I'm going to say render game object. So I guess the difference here is this method takes care of all the game objects, loops through them, and does whatever that does. This one renders one of the game objects' sprites and things. So we'll move this later if we have to, but let's do that first. And now we can go to the game object, get attachments, and say for each attachment, let's say render game objects, and we have all the things, so camera and then the attachment. So now it's gonna look through the game objects, all attachments, and then render them. And currently it's going to do that before it renders the actual unit sprites or the graphics here. So it's going to be below, but it's going to look just like before for us. So let's just try that. All right, I'm just going to try to find someone, and the selection circle seems to be following like it should. Is there a person here? I just want to see them move like into the trees and stuff. And it seems to be working fairly well. So I'm happy with that. So we're going to leave it at that. Now we have attachments. Now we can use the selection circle within our editor when we select our trees and our sceneries. So now let's head over to the input, because now I want to be able to use more mouse buttons than just this primary button. And had the mouse had a lot of different buttons, such as the keyboard, we would have probably used a solution just like this. But since at least my mouse only has 3 buttons, I'm gonna not worry about that, and I'm just gonna duplicate these 3 times. So I'm gonna say right mouse clicked and right mouse pressed. I'm gonna say wheel mouse clicked and wheel mouse pressed. All right, so we are gonna need some getters for these. Whoop. There we go. And now we need to change how these works. So currently we're not looking at what event, or rather what button is pressed. So we need to do that. Actually not in mouse drag, that's going to be the same. But here, mouse pressed. So we just say mouse pressed is true. But here we can actually do, I'm going to say right mouse pressed and wheel mouse pressed. and we can check if this event, e.getButton, is equal to mouse event button1. So that's the primary button. So this will work just like it did before. And we can just actually, I'm just going to copy this. And oddly enough, the right mouse is considered button 3 and the wheel is considered button 2. So now these press things are going to be fine. Now we need to go to the mouse released, and since we are doing two things in here, we are going to make an if statement instead of this one-liner. So if e.get button is equal to mouse event button 1, then do this thing that we did before. And then I'm gonna copy this 2 times. And then if it's button 2, remember this is the wheel button. So wheel mouse pressed. And here is button 3, which will be right mouse clicked and right mouse pressed. All right, now I think we have everything to be able to answer these questions for these as well. But let's go to the clear click. I'm just going to search clear mouse click. So let's clear all of the clicks. All right. Now I think we have everything we need to use all of these. So I'm just gonna close this off. Let's head over to the mouse action. Here, I'm gonna add a method called cleanup. So any mouse action can clean up what it was doing before we change it to another mouse action. So I'm gonna make that a public abstract void cleanup. This means that we need to implement it in these mouse actions. So let's do that, but these mouse actions aren't gonna need them. But now we have done that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is an action called a clear action, which I'm gonna put on our right mouse button. So what it's going to do is it's going to clear the left mouse button action and set it to a default value. So I'm going to say clear action, which is a mouse action. Implement those methods. And I don't think we're doing anything in update. There's no sprites, we're doing no cleanup, we're doing no drag. So really what this is a place where we say on click state get mouse handler set primary button action, and we need some default action to set it to. So I'm just going to create the major tool action that we're going to be doing later. So I'm going to say scenery selection. Maybe SceneryTool is actually a better word because it will be selection, but we're going to have the logic for moving and deleting also in this action. So extends mouse action, and let's implement these methods. All right, so in the clear action, what we're doing is we are setting the primary button action to a new SceneryTool. All right. So that's what this action is gonna do. And just gonna close that. This is what we're gonna fill in, but let's start by going to the mouse handler. So now we have a primary button action, but we need actions for all the buttons. So right button action, maybe, and wheel button action. And I have one too many there. So let's also make a handle button method for all of them. Actually, I'm just gonna do it like handle right button, and then create that method, and then handle wheel button. I'm gonna create that method, and they are gonna look basically the same. So if right button action isn't null, then we're not gonna set it to active consumer right now, but we are gonna update it. And the same is for the wheel button action. Oh, Jesus, there we go. All right, we need a getter and setter for these. So I'm just gonna go down here and make a getter and setter for these actions so that we can give actions to them. So just gonna start like that and pop over to our editor state. So we're setting the primary button action to be a tile placer at the start. Now let's set our right button action to be a new clear action. So what I'm hoping for now is that when we press, actually we need more things, right? So currently we are using the left button on the active consumer, and I feel like let's just do it like this for now, and we might move it later. But if state get input is wheel mouse clicked, then let's do wheel button action on click with the state. And let's see how we do that. Else if state get input is wheel mouse pressed, wheel button action on drag state. All right, so let's do this also for the right button. Is right button clicked, then right button action on click is right button pressed, then right button action on drag. All right, so now what I'm hoping for is that when we enter the editor state, we're gonna have, I'm just gonna load up my regular map. What I'm hoping now is that when I click on my right mouse button, it will change the tool. So therefore we're not gonna see this tile anymore. So let's try that. And it worked, right? So now our active tool for the left mouse button is actually the scenery tool. So now it's the place scenery tool, and we press the right button and it's the scenery tool. So that's great. Now we can start working on our actual tool. Just gonna see how much time I've used. I've used quite a lot of time, so hopefully we can do this rather quickly. So what do I want to have in here? Well, I want to have something I'm going to call a drag position so that we can change, we can move it. And I also want to keep a list of scenery, and I'm going to call it selected scenery. Today we're probably only going to select one at a time, but this will allow us to, in the future, be able to select, like maybe make a selection box and select several things at once. So I'm going to make a constructor. I'm not going to take anything in. I'm just going to initialize this list to an empty list. All right. First of all, we can check here in the update. So I'm going to do some checks, like if state get input is pressed, right? So now I'm just adding the delete. So if we have pressed key event vk delete, then we want to do selected scenery for each state, and I'm going to do it like this, despawn. So we don't have this in the state yet, so I'm going to create that method. I'm just going to say GameObjects.remove. And right now it has scenery. That wasn't what I wanted. Let's just say GameObjects and Shift F6 GameObject. There we go. So now we despawn an object. Great. That should work. I want to, at every update, if we are not pressing our mouse, then I want our drag position to be null. So we're only interested in setting the position of our drag if we are not pressing, or if we are pressing. If we're pressing, we are dragging something. If we're not pressing, we're not dragging it. So the position will be null. And also, if we are changing the primary button action, get mouse handler, get primary button action. If that's not this, then I want to deselect every scenery that we have in our selection list. But that will mean that we are removing from this list. And if we are removing from this list while looping over it, we're going to get a concurrent modification exception, which means we need to make a copy of that list. And I'm going to say this deselect. So we're going to make two methods now. That is select and deselect. So what's that going to look like? Well, select is going to look like this. So we have a scenery, and we say scenery.attach new selection circle, and I'm going to just use 4 as a scale for now. And then let's add that scenery. And then let's also make the deselect. So currently we don't have a reference to the selection circle inside of the scenery, but we know, at least for the moment, that it's the only attachment. So we're going to clear all attachments. And then I'm going to say selected scenery dot remove this scenery. Let's see, during cleanup, we want to do that as well. So just like here, this is what we want to do. Deselect everything. Possibly we should make some, maybe we can do like this, or rather we can actually just use the cleanup. There we go. Let's go to the fun parts. On drag. So what do we want to do? If drag position is equal to null, then we just started pressing our button. We are just starting to drag. So let's set the drag position to a copy of our mouse position. I'm just gonna make sure that now that we've clicked, I'm gonna start by deselecting everything. So let's just say cleanup for now, because that deselects everything. And then let's reselect whatever is colliding with our mouse pointer. To find our mouse pointer on the map, I'm gonna say mouse position, and first I'm actually gonna copy that mouse position again. I guess we could have copied the drag position because currently that's already a copy of the mouse position, but just to be sure that if we do something with the drag position later, we're not gonna get that, let's just get the mouse position again. So now we have a copy of the mouse position on our screen. To get the position on our map, we need to add the camera position. So we've added the camera position. So now this position is the mouse position on our map, on our game map. Now we need to look through all of the scenery objects in this state and see what scenery object now collides with our mouse pointer. So I'm going to do get GameObjects of class scenery.class, and I'm going to say stream. Then I'm going to say filter, and we have the scenery, and it's going to look like this. Scenery, get collision box, get bounds, contains, and we have the mouse position int x and the mouse position int y. And then I'm going to say for each, and say this select. So now we've put all of the colliding objects in our selected list. I think that's it for that. This is enough for selection. And actually, I'm just gonna try that out first. Let's just see if we have some selection boxes. So first of all, right click to switch to the selection tool. And would you look at that? It is selecting, however, as you can see, the selection circle isn't quite where it should be. And that is, I think, if we go to the selection circle, so here we're setting it back half of its width, but the entirety of its height. And I quite rather think that we should change the render offset of our humanoids, because this is for the humanoid, and that probably means that our actual position should be lower. So we'll do that later, but I'm just going to check if this worked. That should center our selection circle around our position of the object. So I'm just going to load it up, and there you have it. So now it is actually selecting, and we made the delete button, remember? Let's try that. Look, it's working. You can delete them. The only problem now is you can't click up here. So if you turn on render collision box, we are checking if its collision box is colliding with our mouse. So you need to click inside of the collision box for it to be selected. All right, so we're almost done. I'm just gonna head back over to this scenery tool and say that else. So right now, all of this we were doing if the drag position was null, which basically means that we just started pressing the button. So now the drag position isn't null. So what does that mean? Well, let's subtract the new mouse position. So in this update, we've moved our mouse position something, and the drag position is what it was last update. Now we have the difference. So I'm going to say selected scenery for each scenery. And now we need to move this scenery. The problem is we can't get the position and then do any changes to that because get position gives us a copy. We probably don't want to mutate this from a getter. So actually, let's just make change position by. So at least it's very clear what this will do. And I'm gonna do that by saying add this position. And of course we need to use this since they had the same name. So this position dot add position. All right. That means that we can do change position by, but we can't just use the drag position as it is because we need it to be inverted. So I'm going to say minus drag position get X and minus drag position get Y. And then I'm going to say that drag position, we need to reset it for the next update. So now this will be a copy of this mouse position. So I'm just gonna start and see what that looks like. All right, right clicking to get rid of the tile placer. And yay, would you look at that? Now we can move our trees around, but you also have to remember to click the collision box. So now we can move our trees around. We can delete them. So that gives us all of the basic tools that we need to be able to create this little map. Now we just need some variations. So we need some more sceneries that we can place and things like that. And then we're gonna go on to making these tiles not walkable, so they're not walking all over the water. Thank you so much for this video, and I will see you soon. Hej då!